Okay. So the course is not that technical actually. It's more on how we implement the Open RAN system we're doing when we're doing a deployment, and we will tackle it as a project, right? So half of my course would be about project management, and the other half would be about technical stuff on network monitoring and how we maintain our equipment. So as you can see, the O-RAN architecture is very complex, right? When you break it down to subtasks, it will look like this. There will be a lot of nodes before you could finish a project. And my guide for this course is actually the Project Management Institute of doing project management work. So there's an organization called as Project Management Institute, which you can be practicing as professional project managers once you certify to PMI. You can also be a member of the Project Manager Accredited organization. It's an international organization for project management. So the one I have is the one below, because what I did was I certified on the higher level. It's the program manager certification because I'm handling more complex projects. It's a combination of small projects combined into one in a very big project, and normally we call it a program. So what is a project? A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or a result, right? So when you say temporary, a project has a start and it should have an end, right? So once it ends, you hand it over to operations. So that's the end of the project. So it's not something that's going to be forever. So it has to be a temporary endeavor, meaning the project should have a start and end date. So this is the project management life cycle. Normally, someone should initiate the project, and then it will be assigned to a PM, and then the PM will come up with a plan. And once it's executed, you need to monitor and control the project. And once everything is done or executed as specified in the scope, then you should be able to close the project eventually. So there are some pillars of project management that you really need to understand. There's scope management, time management, cost management, quality management, HR management, communication management, how to handle risk, that's risk management, procurement management, and project implementation. These are all in the PMI knowledge areas. So these are the pillars of your project management function. So there are normally constraints when you handle a project. Of course, there is time. You should be able to deliver the project on time. Time is not, a luxury that everybody has. When you say that you will finish it in 3 years, you have to finish it in 3 years, right? And then there's a scope. The scope should be well defined at the start of the project. Otherwise, if there's going to be changes in the scope, sometimes we call it as a project manager scope creep, you need to have a change request to accommodate that change in scope. And then, of course, there are constraints in the resources, meaning the engineer or the subject matter expert assigned to your project are not allocated to you permanently. They're only doing work for you temporarily. So normally they have other works, and in order to manage it carefully, you should be able to manage the time, your resources that they'll be available during the implementation of the project. So that's the primary responsibility of the PM. Again, this is the project management life cycle. It just defines what's initiating. So in the initiation, it defines what's the request and the objectives all about. And then you will have to plan for it, develop the specific approach of how to execute. And then once you execute, you manage it. And then, of course, you monitor and control it. And before you close the project, you need to review it. You need to understand if all the expectations of the stakeholders are fulfilled. So when you enroll to my course, this is what you will encounter in Rakuten Learning Hub. So the first module will look like this, and it's called Introduction to Project Management. Normally, there are associated videos in it so that you'll be able to understand how a project management life cycle goes. So the typical, is there a question? Someone raised his hand. Can we do it at the end of the session? Bianca, is that a valid
No
question?
problem, sir. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So what are some of the struggles often experienced in the project? So normally it's about the definition of the scope. So in the scope, this is where you need to have at least 10 to 15% of your time so that when you execute the project, there are no gray areas, right? So you need to clarify, and define the requirements carefully. Everything should be there and everything should be documented. In order to do that, before you start a project, normally you gather all your stakeholders or the major sponsors of the project and you do a project kickoff. So this is a normal approach, right? So once you have the project kickoff, you define the scope of your work, and then you also need to write a document which is called the project chart. So you will have to get all of your stakeholders, external department stakeholders, your senior leadership. If necessary, if you need the legal advice, you also need to include them in your project. So normally, what I do is I prepare a stakeholders matrix and define each position of those people that are going to be included in the project. So as I've said, we need to define our requirements carefully. So normally I prepare a requirement list as an outline before I put them into the project chart. So as you can see, an Open RAN system is very complex. There are virtual servers, there are baseband units. So you need to define all of them, and you need to understand each of the tasks involved for the major platform. Again, we need to clarify, and define the requirements. So the project chart normally has the following outline. So you need to have the objectives, you need to set the rough timeline, and you have to define the roles and responsibilities of the project team, including major sponsors or stakeholders. And then the most important one is define the project requirements. And this will be your initial contract for the project. So we need to understand that the project charter is like a draft of your project plan. It's a rough timeline, a rough cost estimate, and a rough schedule. So this is only an initial document that you are starting the project and that everybody agrees to the requirements of your project. Okay, so as you can see, this is what you will encounter in the Learning Hub. Module 2 will be the definition of the scope and out of scope requirements. And that is an important topic that you will have to understand. And then after that, you will The next module will be the creation of the project charter and project plan. So again, this will be a combination of PDF documents that you need to read and videos for actual experience and how you do a project charter and a project plan. So this is how a project charter looks like. So it can be a one-pager because it's a rough draft, right? And it only defines the initial scope, but it will be refined when you do the actual project plan. So this is like just a stamp of approval that everybody or stakeholders needs to approve on, and it is authorizing the PM to start the project. Okay, now we go to the project plan. So the project plan is now the formal document that will define the implementation of your project. So as again, it's similar to the project charter, but now this is more specific and it has more details. In here, you will also see that you will also have to define how you will communicate your project to the stakeholders. And this is something that I normally do. You need to prepare a project workbook and list down all the elements that will be included in your project plan. So this is a sample of a project website project. And as you can see, there are a lot of tasks that needs to be done. And we will have to define each and every task because you will include it in your project schedule. So in project management, we call this task as work breakdown structures. So normally you will have to prepare your task list and the schedule of implementation of each task. And then you will convert it to an actual project schedule. As I've said, the task list, as we call them, are also called your work breakdown structure or work packages. And you will have to define each milestone. Normally, a milestone is just an indication if a major undertaking is completed. And the milestone is normally composed of many tasks and subtasks under it. So this is how a project schedule will look like. This is an actual example of a project schedule. And this is about software development. Is it clear so far? Can I get a thumbs up if everything is understandable at your end? Okay, thank you. Again, this is your actual project schedule. Normally, you have your MS project to prepare this, right? So if you're familiar with the MS project tool, normally you will be able to define each task and just fill out the task in your project schedule using Microsoft Project. And once you use the MS project, you'll be able to define or see what your critical path is. So as you can see, the critical path method is the longest sequence of activities that must be finished on time in order for the entire project to be completed. So normally, that is something that you need to track.
In project management, the most effective way of ensuring timely product delivery is nothing but efficient planning. Making sure each resource is allocated to the most critical task or activity in the whole project cycle. Critical path method in project management is exactly how project managers can plan their projects to ensure project delivery in time. Hello, this is Ryan from Invensys Learning. And I welcome you all to our YouTube channel. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and press that bell icon to get the latest updates on Invensys Learning. In today's session, we will learn about the CPM or critical path method that project managers use to plan their projects. We will start with the introduction to CPM and why we use it. Moving further, we will find a critical path in a project. And finally, we will sum up this session with the advantages of the critical path method in project management. I hope you are clear about the agenda. Also, if you're looking for a PMP certification training program, enroll in Invensis Learning. The link is given in the description. Now, let's begin our session. So, what is the critical path method? It is a project modeling technique used by the project managers to ensure timely delivery of the project. They identify the starting time and an efficient finish time based on the CPM that will give a clear picture of the schedules and other parameters like resource allocation, time management, etc. Let's take a simple hypothetical example. I have given you a project to make a t-shirt, and I want to know how long it will take for you to do that. Now, as a project manager, you would need to start from the beginning. You will identify the activities that need to be performed for the end product. You will find the dependencies of the activities on one another. You will find the time taken to complete each activity alone. In the end, you will use the critical path method to get an estimate of the final delivery of the product. This is how the whole process works in a nutshell. Now, before we dig deeper, let's learn why we use the critical path method. In the early days, the critical path method was able to revive the old projects that were behind schedule. But, nowadays CPM can easily identify the most important activities in a project. This helps in focusing on more important activities efficiently. And since CPM can identify the slack for the non-dependent activities in a complex project, it becomes easier to deal with setbacks. Now, let's understand how we will find a critical path in a project. Let's consider a hypothetical project in which we have activities A, B, C, D, E, F. We have the duration that they will take to finish individually with specific values. And since it is a hypothetical project, we are also assuming we already know the dependencies. Although, in a real project the dependencies have to be identified. Even the duration is decided using various methods. One can use past projects' experience or analyze the data for similar projects, or it can be guesswork based on experience as well. The point is to map these activities together based on duration and dependencies. Now, to calculate the critical path method, we will write the duration of each activity and calculate the maximum amount of time the path takes. That will be the critical path for the project. Since ABDF is taking the longest, that is the critical path. Now, to calculate the slack, we will subtract the second longest path from the critical path. Slack is nothing but the time that can be spared for a specific activity without delaying the finish of the project. And the result will be the slack for the activities that are not present in the critical path. If any of the activity is having a shared dependency, it will take the float of the path that has more weightage. And the critical path will have zero slack since the duration of the project depends on the critical path. And that is how we can follow the same approach to plan a real project as well. Also, there is one more approach. Project evaluation and review technique is also known as PERT, that is used to plan models. But the major difference between CPM and PERT is that the events in the PERT approach do not have a time duration mentioned. Drop a comment, guys, if you want us to make a detailed session on PERT as well. Now, moving further, let's discuss a few advantages of the critical path method. The advantages of the critical path method are as follows. The dependency of the activities in the project is clear in a critical path method. CPM helps in identifying the most important and critical tasks/activities in the project. It helps in saving time by utilizing the slack and moving resources on critical activities. The most important advantage is the planning of the project in a structured format to identify shortcomings and delays as well. And in the end, optimizing resources to prevent delay in the project completion. The efficiency of the greatest projects was not measured by how much planning was done. It is always about the scheduled time for finishing the project. So, in order to be a successful project manager, one must understand what kind of resources are needed at exactly which activity at what point in time of the project. The critical path method in project management ensures that no delays are faced at the end of the project. And, at the end of the day, that is all that matters. With this, we have come to the end of the session. If you are looking to grow in your project management career, enroll in Invensis's PMP certification training program. The link is given in the description. If you like this session, do subscribe. And tell us in the comments, what kind of projects would you plan using the critical path method?
So, any clarifications, maybe we can have those questions at the end of the session. So I'll be moving forward. So I think the video will tell you that the superior method is the critical path method compared to the PERT CPM. And normally, this is the one that we normally track and communicate with our stakeholders if we're going to be delayed in delivering the project. Again, this is an example of a project plan and a project schedule. A milestone is a marker in a project that signifies a change or stage in development. And normally under your milestones are tasks, major tasks, and subtasks that will have to be included in your project plan. So now we will go to the implementation phase, right? So once you execute your project, normally you will have to monitor and also control it. Because if your project is, for example, having so many variants in cost, that is something that you need to have or control. And those items will have to be communicated to your stakeholders. So in your project plan, you will also have to define a communication plan, right? That's the difference between a project charter and your project plan. The details are in your project plan. And for me, I normally have a communication metrics whom I need to what do you call this, communicate with in a monthly basis or weekly basis. So I have a definite schedule of publishing my reports for each of the stakeholders. So your stakeholders can be internal and external. So for external, normally I do it just once a month or maybe every quarter. But for internal stakeholders, they are the ones really monitoring your project. So normally I have a bi-weekly status report that I publish for them to read. So included in your project plan, if you will come up with your project schedule, are again, I'm emphasizing that you need to have your task list and your work breakdown schedule. So once you execute, you need to really monitor your milestones and see if you're on track. Otherwise, this should be reported in your status that you provide to your stakeholders. And then during the course of your implementation, it will not be smooth, right? There will be issues along the way during your implementation. Normally, you will have to prepare an issue register. What are the issues that you encounter in your project? You have to define them and rank them if they are medium, high, or low issues. And you will have to provide the owner of that issue so that your project can work smoothly and manage the issues very well on a time and respond timely for each of the issues. All of this project documents should have a central location. Normally nowadays it's just a shared drive, right? And the PM will have to provide access to each and every member of the project. It is a living document. You should provide a read and write function to each individual member depending on their role on the project. If, for example, a major business sponsor is part of the project, then you will have to give him read-write access. And then your status report can be a formal status report in a Word document or PDF file. It can be an email, right? That you just normally send on a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis. And this is how a format of a status report looks like that you might want to follow. So it clearly defines the description, what is the project, the timeline, right? If you're behind, the progress or the key milestones that you need to communicate, the deadlines are clearly stated, what are the issues, and what are the action items for those issues and the next steps that you're going to undertake in order to complete the project. Okay, so once you're done with your project, or almost going to the completion stage, then you will have to have a review process, right? This is where you discuss what went wrong and what went right. And you will have to hold a final interview with your business sponsors if all the things that were included in the scope was actually fulfilled. And then you will document it in your lessons learned document. And you don't put it somewhere, but you normally archive it in an active archive folder so that when another project comes along and similar to your project that you have just completed, they will be able to learn what mistakes were committed or maybe some issues that were encountered so that they'll be guided accordingly if a new project comes along. And then once you're done with the project, you have to close it, right? Remember during the start of our session, a project is a temporary endeavor. Normally, it has a start and it has an end date, right? So in order for the project to close, you need to have a project closure document. And the major stakeholders needs to approve that closing document so that everybody are in sync, that all of the requirements of the project or scope were fulfilled and it's according to standards and quality. You normally have to review your objectives again and discuss it openly with the stakeholders. Again, in summary, these are the project management concepts that we have so far defined and discussed. We have defined the project, what is a project life cycle, what are the project management functions or the pillars, the triple constraints that you will encounter doing a project. And of course, these are the everyday tasks of your project. In your project plan, you need to have a project workbook, a project work breakdown structure or task so that you can come up with your project schedule, and then you will have to define your communication matrix. And once you close the project, you have to have your lessons learned. Everything should be discussed in a project closure document, should be approved by the stakeholder. Okay, so now we go to the second part. Any questions so far? So if you'll allow me, Bianca, we'll just take it up in the last session, right?
Yes,
In
sir.
the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we go to the part 2 of the course. So now we go to the network monitoring system. So once you have completed the O-RAN deployment, as discussed earlier by Dr. Richard Matias, then you will have to monitor your network, right? So it's not a rocket science, right? For us in the industry, what do? We engage vendors who are really have this application already. And then once you also complete your project, you normally have to engage your vendors for the maintenance of your system. So as you can see, once your Open RAN system is in operation, it's a multiple platform and you will have multiple equipment installed. So you need to have an effective network monitoring system. As you can see, it's complex, right? So in order to do that, as I've said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but you need to engage your vendors and maybe come up with a best practice in the industry and get that network monitoring system. So let me share my video again, how we normally do it in the industry.
An exciting new world of opportunities for carrier service providers. The explosive growth of Internet of Things devices, connected cars, augmented and virtual reality innovations will all be dependent on blazing fast 5G networks. Of course, with these opportunities also comes increased complexities and new challenges. In order to take full advantage of the 5G evolution, you need visibility and invaluable insights into network problems, so you can pinpoint issues and achieve automation. You need a flexible monitoring solution that offers visibility across hybrid environments. You need NetScout. We are the only company that provides a carrier-grade monitoring solution that delivers end-to-end smart visibility from RAN to core, including virtualized core, CRAN, and edge computing. From planning, launch, to operations, NetScout's 5G solution offers unparalleled scalability and complete real-time insight for multi-generation mobile technologies across hybrid networks. NetScout's agile software-based appliances are designed for monitoring the cloud and are VNF ready. As a carrier service provider, you need to be ready to deliver on the promise of 5G and take full advantage of tremendous new business opportunities. NetScout can help you get smart visibility from here to 5G. Visit netscout.com/5G or contact us today to find out how you can ensure your 5G success.
So once you're doing your maintenance and monitoring, these are the things that you normally have to watch out, right? Is there a performance optimization? And you should provide your bandwidth crunch, right? If you don't have enough bandwidth, then there should be a problem with your network. With your network monitoring system, like NetScout, you'll be able to do network forensics and check if there are latencies and jitter resulting in poor voice and video communication. And then you have to define your quality of service, right? QoS is a set of technologies that work on a network to guarantee its ability to dependably run high-priority applications. For example, video, voice. So that defines as well the quality of experience that are being experienced by your end users. So these two critical metrics are the ones you need to monitor when you're doing network monitoring of your O-RAN system. And then, of course, from time to time, you need to do an end-to-end testing of your whole system if everything is functioning normally. Otherwise, if you don't do end-to-end testing up to the from the start and beginning of your network, then you'll not be able to pinpoint which part of the platform is causing the problem. So this is a typical scenario of how you do end-to-end testing. So there are a lot of vendors that can help you out here. Parallel wireless, wireless, as mentioned by Richard Matias, and then Rohde & Schwarz are typical vendors that can help you with your end-to-end. So let me stop my presentation here and maybe let's take a look at how an end-to-end testing is done in the actual world.
An Open RAN environment allows network operators to break apart the radio, distributed, and centralized units, providing freedom of choice to select the best-of-breed vendors for the various components, creating a more price-competitive environment and promising enhanced service delivery, supporting new network architectures like 5G and beyond. But this open environment also creates a new set of challenges. Testing this environment requires a new approach to ensure interoperability of a complex, always evolving, multi-vendor setup, meet strict carrier-grade performance requirements for field readiness, and support the goals of more cost-effective, price-competitive business models. End-to-end testing is critical to ensure that the extremely complex technologies spanning multiple domains, OSI layers, and network scenarios work together reliably and deliver the operational efficiencies promised by Open RAN. In this demonstration, Spirent will emulate the core network, user, and RF channel conditions. A common user interface controls all the elements surrounding the system under test, which includes a real RU, DU, and CU from different vendors. The core emulator is represented on the right-hand side. Users can see the AMF and UPF listed, and the visualization diagram shows how the core is represented and emulated. The left side of the screen contains various aspects of the core emulator, including the ability to use external data for real-world testing, such as website browsing or video streaming for a realistic testing scenario. Additional menu options provide access to parameters of this test configuration, such as the number of UEs. In this example, there are 5. However, it could be hundreds of UEs, or even a real user device. Here, the type of technology to be used is selected. In this example, the test will use 5G New Radio, a single cell, and band 78. Once testing starts, users can observe the system's activity through test logs, which include setup steps such as memory allocation and error and license checks. Once running, the log file shows the 5 UEs and progress of messages. Users can choose to filter the log to only view updates on the UE or traffic layers of interest. Here, results are filtered to UE ID 1 and IP layer traffic. While the test is running, users can review the user scenarios, test setup, and data traffic that's in progress. This test shows both real-time uplink and downlink bit rates. Users have the option to review real-time results in several formats, including graphical and tabular. Round-trip delay shows the minimum, maximum, and average delays along with standard deviation. Once the test is complete, results are available through log files or for export for analysis in tools such as Wireshark, which can be helpful for debugging. Using Spirent's end-to-end O-RAN solution, all test setup and execution is enabled through a single user experience with a variety of options including test types, functions to be emulated, and emulation scale and capabilities. Leveraging real-time emulation under an automated single-user experience, Spirent's pre-integrated solutions simplify and streamline the test process so our customers can confidently deploy O-RAN and realize its true benefits while achieving significant operational efficiencies. Learn more about Spirent's full portfolio of O-RAN test solutions by visiting our website at spirent.com/ORAN.
Okay, so I hope you understand now how an end-to-end testing is done. So in end-to-end testing, you need to have a software which emulates each of the platform, including your user equipment or the handset that the actual users do use, right? And you can simulate, for example, for a specific cell site and the number of user equipment that are using that cell site. And from there, you can capture all the logs and take a look which part of the platform is having. Okay. Now we go to when you have implemented Open RAN, as you have, if you are regularly attending the Asia Open RAN session, Sir Richard also discussed that most of our systems are already virtualized, right, in the Open RAN system. He was saying that we can use any COT server off the shelf and then have it virtualized, meaning it will have virtual CPUs in it and will be able to use containers, Kubernetes, and everything. And then from that virtualization, we have APIs which can do machine learning and AI. And in applying machine learning and AI in the virtualized environment, we will be able to control some of the specific key parameters in our Open RAN system. For example, the beam of the antenna, it's called beam index. Using machine learning and AI, you can redirect the propagation of your beam towards the most populated area so that you can efficiently cover that specific area that you need to broadcast your equipment or 5G network. You can also use also AI for the positioning, GPS location of your end users. You can also use AI or machine learning for the speed, and then the channel quality indicator. So all historic values can be also captured using your machine learning tool because everything is now virtualized. Again, we have discussed previously that since you are using a virtualized network, you can also perform network slicing. So you will assign a specific portion of CPU using AI just for that specific function in order to improve your quality of service and network performance. So machine learning can have algorithms. Normally, they are APIs that can enhance automation and adaptability for efficient orchestration of your dynamic provisioning of your network. Other uses of AI would be in your planning and maintenance. Predicting and forecasting the network resources can enable wireless operators to anticipate network outages, equipment failures, and performance degradation. I think Richard, in the start of the lesson, also discussed about in the US, now they have what they call power saving initiatives, right? Normally, they use machine learning to, for example, turn off your radio units or lessen the power of radio units at night when there are not so many end users using the system. You can also use it for scaling and predicting user equipment mobility, right? Because you have algorithms embedded in your machine learning. Your AI can also enhance the security of your 5G networks or open LAN systems in preventing attacks and frauds by recognizing user patterns and tagging certain events to prevent similar attacks in the future. So, for example, if the end user has a pattern, for example, this MAC address is being tagged as hacker, you can always do that because you have algorithms in machine learning to capture those hackers. So now we go to the last part of my presentation and the last part of the actual course. Once we have operated the equipment and deployed your Open LAN system, you normally have to be careful in selecting your vendors. So your vendors normally will provide maintenance or warranties to your equipment. But before you buy an equipment, you should be able to review already and maybe discuss it with them what would be their service level agreement, what will be the coverage, for example, of their warranty, what will be their assurance, what will be your assurance that they will honor their commitment, for example, to change your equipment if it's broken. And this is part of your RMA or return merchandise authorization. A return merchandise authorization or return of goods is a part of the process returning product to receive a refund, replacement, or repair from which vendor and seller agree upon during the product warranty period. Sometimes this is a contention with your vendors. They will say that, oh, it's not part of the warranty. But if you have fully discussed it and document it, then they will have no excuse of not replacing your equipment if it's broken. So this is what I'm emphasizing in the engineering maintenance module of this course.